hinted in an earlier video about going to look over the diesel heater that we have had in the cabin. It's a car unit. It was purchased used many years ago when my dad built this cabin and he installed heated floors inside it. And it started acting up some years ago and we haven't used it for many years, but now the cabin was, because it's on wheels, so now it was next to the garage, so we wanted to look at it first. The timer for it did not seem to want to work. You just bring a car battery and you can start it and use it, so started with the timer first at least. And it's a simple unit. I think it's called, the model name is BBW46 or something. I can't remember if it's Webasto or Ebersprecher, but it's kind of a generic car unit. The timer could get it to kind of work sometimes, so there seemed to be some bad connection, but everything looked really clean in there. I was worried there would be corrosion. Just clean things up with some like electronics cleaner, and it seemed to work okay, but we will come back to this one later in the video. And with that operation we could start kind of testing it out, and still it would not run. So next item on the list was fuel. And fuel, it's been out there for many years, water corrosion. We will see what we find. And yes, the fuel inlet on the pump was kind of clogged. I'm not sure if it's coagulated the diesel or whatever it is, but we did our best cleaning it up. We did test cycle it, just putting leads on the battery, do quick cycles. These tick pumps just work on a kind of a pulse, so don't put it on the battery and just connect it, you will burn things up. Back out there, and things started working. Hadn't been able to seal all the hoses fully, but it started running, so that's good. But it would not start heating everything. So next up is the circulation pump. You can hear the air fan blowing at least, but it started doing odd sounds, and that's probably from boiling. So next up, put some wooden clamps with screws on there to be able to disconnect the hoses that feeds into the cabin. My dad was dead set on it being air in the system, but I doubt that. There was some air in the system later on when we got it running, but I don't think that caused any of the issues. The pump, on the other hand, was not running at all. So that was disconnected, and the electric connector on top of the unit, it's not super easy to work with either to open up, and you have to actually kind of remove pins from them because the pins go directly to some of the parts. And here we did a test start with it dry. I'm not sure we burned things up here. That's gonna cause us more issues, but more on that will come. The pump, eventually I got the electric connector part, the pins out, and I could have the pump loose with me, bring it into the garage. Tested it on the battery directly, and it was dead, did not move whatsoever. And looking at spare parts for this unit, a new pump is quite expensive, so I figured I would look into it a little deeper before buying something. And it was a little tricky getting it apart. It was kind of corroded together. It has seen some salt during its life, I would guess, while it was still mounted in the car. But it looked really good inside. Gentle tapping, Realized it was better to tap on the lid itself, and things started slowly moving. And with it broken apart, everything looks good. The connectors, everything looks good. There are some tiny springs pushing things down. We did some moving stuff around. It started working again. So we decided to put it back together and bring it out and give that a test. And now the fuel pump refused to work. And we decided to bring the entire unit into the garage for further diagnosis. With it inside, we cleaned up a couple of bad ground connectors. Wonder if it could be something as simple as that. I had read through the manual I'd found online, and but hadn't read it well enough, it seems. We rigged up a tank and did a test run. Here we have leads going to the pump and like manually cycling it, and then it starts burning and heating stuff, and the pump was running for a little bit, but it also stopped again. But here I think the self circulation was enough that it actually moved some fluid. Pump came back out. This time we decided to get some electric or some sandpaper in there and try to clean things up a little better. Tricky getting some fine sandpaper in there, but eventually I had things lined up and we could hook it up to the drill to spin it some to clean things up. With it back together, we test ran it on just the battery directly, and this one was so tricky to getting the pins in and out of the connector, so I ended up cutting the leads and adding extra connectors on them. And here I read the manual more closely, and during our testings I think we burnt up a temperature fuse. Well, we did, and it's like $100, almost 1,000 Swedish Monopoly money to buy a new one. But I came to the conclusion we could just skip that one, just cut and twisted the wires. Because here we're shorting things out, and everything starts up because it will not allow the fuel pump to start without that fuse on there. There is a possibility to have one that is resettable, but I'm not sure about that. But we decided to just, and it's inside the fluid. I was hoping it would be like a recess and the fluid would not leak out, but it was. So we're gonna use this without it. And here we did a test start with me forgetting to reinstall the fuse. So that it sprayed water all over. Here we're just playing with water, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But we had also removed the timer on it and just had a switch to turn on and off to activate the unit, to remove that as a fault source, and because it was still acting up and hard to push, so some very fine sandpaper on the circuit board, and now it seems to work a lot better. And here we are doing full cycle run to check that the temperature sensor at least is operating at the correct temperatures, because at some set temperature according to the manual it should reduce the cycle rate of the pump, and it does that at the correct temperature. And if the temperature still rises, it will shut down by itself. We also tried adding some cool water, because it still runs the circulation pump, and adding some more cold water, the temperature dropped and it fired back up again and kept running for its full hour. That's the longest duration the timer allows, as I understand it. We will see if we need to fix some better timer or maybe a temperature sensor set up within the cabin, but that's something for later, not critical. We found that the mounting points for it had the rubber vibration mounts. One of those had broken, and decided to secure it properly. Here we used some rubber spacers from something else and then bolts all the way through to make sure it's secure in place.
Ja, så det är någonting.
And then with everything secured, it was moved back out onto the cabin. The final test run was done, and everything seems to work as it should, so that's good. It took way too long. It should have taken just half the time to get this sorted, but the fuse caused us some headache, and eventually I had it running. Walking in there, I could feel the floor heating up with my feet. So that's it for now. Well, I can show you of the cover over it. It used to have this open hatch, and it allowed critters to get in, so that was covered with a little flap. But I think if we actually let it operate, we will remove the big door that was built to allow better circulation around the unit itself during operation. So by now it's less snow and the cabin is out next to there. We're gonna attack with the brush cutters this summer.